Video games are electronic machines manipulated by humans to create visual effects on a screen. Might not sound that interesting when worded like that, but 1.2 billion people play video games, and this makes it one of the most popular hobbies out there. But how did it become so popular? The first video games were made out of strong post-war machines, which in the Second World War were used to crack codes and calculations. The first known machine that worked as a video game had the name Cathode Ray Tube Amusement Device, and were built in 1948. It worked as an early kind of shooter where the player represented a dot on the screen, and the goal was to shoot down airplanes. The game that is considered to be the mother of all video games is the Tennis for Two. It was built as an analog computer, not so different from the code cracking machine from the Second World War. Not to be mistaken for Pong, this game was built as a tennis or table tennis area where the player could play against the computer, and in later versions adjust the gravity level to make the game more difficult. In the 1970s, people understood that video games were growing popular, and it got commercial attention in the form of arcade games. Here Pong played an important role and is considered the first commercially successful video game. Pong is also the first video game that occupied the homes in the form and name of Home Pong. The alteration from arcade halls to households also made games like Space Invaders and Asteroid very popular. Asteroid, for example, sold over 70,000 machines, pretty much of that time. The theme video games now became pop culture. The 80s is a symbol for colorful culture, and this reflected upon the video games. With the uprising of the second generation consoles, the video games became more advanced. This is also the peak era of arcade games, which you can see at the popular games like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong was in fact the first appearance of Mario, although he was in this game just called Jumpman. As the video games continued to grow, the American market was not equally attractive as before. There were, for example, confusingly many platforms to play on, and a video game machine was not cheap. Instead, the consumers turned their heads to Japan, which made an earlier character, now with a real name, a prophet for gaming culture. The 80s also showed the super evolution of computer games. Companies as Commodore, Tandy and even Apple made their computers intended for households. The users could with these machines make their own simple games. Groups intending to make new computer games formed, and soon new type of games flooded the market, and the PC gaming were born. As we come closer to the 90s, the third generation of consoles explodes the video game market. This generation is called the 8-bit era and focuses on the home video game console that is called Nintendo Entertainment System, by the company Nintendo of course. It is first released in Japan under the name Famicom, but is later introduced to the American market as NES, where it has so far sold 34 million units. The NES sold by far the most third generation machines, and this probably due to the popular and different games that could be played on it. For example, several versions of Super Mario Bros. And the first Legend of ZELDA and Metroid. Except from America and Japan, other markets were not equally easy dominated by Nintendo due to the other companies' breakthroughs. For example, the popular computers Amstrad CPC and Commodore 64 prevented Nintendo to grow big in Europe. The 90s was also a place for new, innovative gaming industry, where 3D graphics made genres like first-person shooters, MMOs, and real-time strategy possible. This time also gave birth to the fourth generation of video game consoles, where Nintendo had the most popular console again. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or simply SNES, have sold over 49 million units worldwide. The SNES contained games like Mortal Kombat, Star Fox, and Virtua Racing. With the rise of 3D graphics, computer games started to develop with an unstoppable speed. The increase in computer power and the reduction of the price of processors made more powerful graphic cards and sound cards possible, which in turn made games like Wolfenstein 3D, Warcraft, Starcraft, and Command & Conquer possible. Games that we today see very popular descendants to. In the end of the 90s, we welcomed the fifth generation of consoles. This generation is known for its leap from 2D console gaming to 3D console gaming. This is also the first generation when Nintendo isn't the best-selling company. Instead, a company that takes inspiration from Nintendo produces the best-selling console. It is Sony with their super machine and franchise PlayStation. PlayStation probably sold better because of the use of CD-ROMs in their machine, whilst Nintendo used their old ROM cartridges. CD-ROMs could hold over 10 times more data than the cartridges, which in theory favored a more complicated game with more space to store graphics and programming on. Although Nintendo fell behind, They had titles which were revolutionary. For example, James Bond GoldenEye, which was the first console-exclusive first-person shooter, and was also the first game containing special features that became unique for the genre, such as headshots, scopes, and mission-based levels. Other games that were iconic for this machine, Nintendo 64, were Legend of ZELDA, Ocarina of Time, and of course Mario 64, that were both 3D person open world games. For the PlayStation, Gran Turismo was the game that sold the most, followed by the earlier Nintendo exclusive Square Enix's Final Fantasy VII. Here was also Resident Evil, the game which is considered the first survival horror game. With a new century, a new generation of gaming consoles were on the horizon. Sony is first out and releasing the PlayStation 2 with their DVD-based game discs, and second comes Nintendo with a GameCube. This time the big computer company Microsoft wants to join in on the race and launches a new machine and concept called Xbox. Later, Grand Theft Auto 3 was released. Except being a set piece of the debate of violence in video games, this game popularized open-world gameplay, and is considered as one of the biggest milestones in gaming. It is also first now that the franchise Grand Theft Auto takes form. Nintendo, who partly has its own games and features, released some of the most well-known titles throughout gaming, where Super Mario Smash Bros. Is one of them. This, reviving old fighting game roots, was the best-selling GameCube game. Another popular game was the Xbox's Halo. This, except being another great shooter, is one of the first popular online games. In Halo, common online types of mission was born. For example, Capture the Flag, that's today still very popular in online gaming. Besides the huge success on the console market, the beginning of the year of 2000 was also a huge success to the PC industry, with games like Half-Life. The earlier urge to being able to modify and create new PC games upon other PC games lived on. The best example for this is probably Counter-Strike, which is a Half-Life based modification. Counter-Strike is one of the most popular games, and is probably for many considered the one and only founder of all shooter games. Counter-Strike, together with Quake and Unreal Tournament, are some of the reasons to why computer gaming became more popular than console gaming in the beginning of this century. In 2004, World of Warcraft shows the market the capability that PC gaming has. By reviving an older title, Blizzard makes a new version of the world of Azeroth, and thus creating the, to this day, most played, massively multiplayer online role-playing game. The year after, Capcom's Resident Evil returned in a 4th edition, showing that horror games is not dead. Later that year, the 7th generation of consoles were introduced. By this time, the consoles had a much more advanced machinery than before. The old companies Sony, Microsoft and Nintendo is here again, releasing one console each. Microsoft with the Xbox 360, Sony with the PlayStation 3, and Nintendo with their Wii. This time Nintendo won the race again, with 100 million sold units. Here games had a much more advanced interface than earlier. The upgraded graphic cards found in the consoles made the game graphics better than ever before. This, along with stronger processors and memories, made this generation extraordinary. And because of this, a huge variety of high-end games could be possible. And among them we find titles like Assassin's Creed 1 and 2 and Halo 3. Later, BioShock is introduced to both consoles and PC gaming, becoming a one-of-a-kind game that revolutionized the story-themed games of the time, followed by Grand Theft Auto 4 with astonishing graphics that revived the old Rockstar series, showing once again what the open-world action game is. The best-selling game of the 7th generation was the Wii Sports, that overtook the crown from Super Mario Bros. And became the best-selling video game of all time. In the year of 2009, an indie company named Mojang created a game called Minecraft. It has simple graphics and is based upon the creativity of the player, where the player's task is to build and survive. Minecraft, born from an indie idea, is today the most sold PC game ever. With the release of Sony's PlayStation 4, the 8th and latest generation of consoles was introduced. Not many games have been released or sold so far, but the generation has only been out for 1.5 years. With this in mind, the console gamers hope that the companies can show their old and full potential again. The selection of games and consoles in this episode was not easy to go through. The respect and love we have for some games and consoles that didn't make it on our final list is big. What do you think? Did we miss a great piece of your childhood, or didn't we even mention your favorite console? Let us know in the comments below.